does the idea for reimagining a video game occur? We know the basic concept here. Instead of crafting a one-for-one remake, our idea is to overhaul the design completely for a largely different experience. Now, before we get into this video essay, I'd like to preface and say that I'm not opposed to the idea of one-for-one remakes. The tried and true motto always signifies some true phrasing behind this terminology. If it ain't broke, then don't fix it too much. The adaptability of muscle memory has also been seen as a very important factor within video games. A perfect example is how they handle similar inputs with fighting games. There's a golden standard for particular motions in Street Fighter. Ryu's Hadouken input has mostly been quarter circle forward punch since the dawn of Street Fighter 2. It has largely been unchanged going forward from the second title all the way to the 6th iteration. However, Mortal Kombat iterations from Mortal Kombat 9, X, and Mortal Kombat 11 were significantly overhauled. This experience is equivalent to learning a brand new game every singular time. There is a purist demographic where too much change might be seen as annoying to those who got used to things like AI pathing, secrets, inputs, weapon placements, combat, and functionality that was more or less deemed as fine to them. Suddenly, it has been apparent that despite everything mentioned, we see that reimaginings are now deemed as the gold standard when involving remakes. Being foreign to prior muscle memory or cutting out portions of content just to fit the new narrative might come with some concern. After all, when you dive into a pool for reimagined content, then you're more or less likely to be working with a new director, new script writers, and a new visionary who didn't really retrofit all of the previous content from the original in this new package. Resident Evil 2 Remake set the world ablaze with updating modernized controls, graphics, and completely rewriting the script for new method acting, new actors, new dialogue, new scenes, etc. This isn't inherently bad because the gameplay wheel was reinvented with Resident Evil 4. As much as people hate to admit this, fixed camera and tank controls are not modernized concepts in 2019 and onward. Fixed camera and tank controls came from a time where that style clicked among the audience. There wasn't a sharp reinvention like Resident Evil 4 during that time. Everyone knows that Resident Evil 4's success with Over the Shoulder allowed the industry to effectively adopt a new method for third-person shooters. The reason why Resident Evil 1 Remake remained fixed camera was based on the fact that the formula was unbroken at the time. From a stylistic standpoint, Shinji Mikami probably wanted this game to be a reflection to the original more or less, altering just enough yet keeping that constant core gameplay towards the original design principle. Therefore, I would say the reason why reimaginings happen in the first place is simply based on the time gap between when the game was released and when modern gameplay conventions took hold within the industry. This is what you normally would expect. This is normally what happens when there's an influence and drastic overhaul in gameplay, especially when you think about Final Fantasy VII Remake versus the original. Turn-based is still a popular venue as seen in titles like Persona 5. However, Square clearly wanted modernization from top to bottom, which means that the action RPG format was ideal for this company. Change is a large part of this structure as well. Who doesn't want to go into this method, this idea that you could deep dive into a toy box and put your own stamp on the original? Reimaginings are not perfect, but they do have their own place in reinvigorating the brand for those people who probably didn't play the original title. I've seen this waved around within newer generations. The reality is that some people aren't born around the time that these older gen games were released. There are developers who don't do a great job in game preservation, so a lot of these things from the PS1 era are lost in time. Same for the PS2 as well. Another subjective standpoint comes from the territory of some people being spoiled to modern day graphics. I'm sure you've probably known that one person who says, ew, this game looks too old, I'm not playing this due to the graphics or playstyle. This means that a reimagining could do various things to fix that problem. It could look better, utilize modern graphics, utilize modern gameplay, and retrofit some foreseeable things that occur later in the timeline. The latter is usually attributed to good writing because this is normally where plot holes or retcons will occur for better or worse. Reimaginings are also meant to probably use the original as a blueprint as well. The goal is using that blueprint for basic story beats. Usually the change here can be seen as good or largely annoying depending on the individual. If you're the kind of person who prefers the original plot being largely untouched, then you probably would hate reimaginings just based on their principle alone, unless your mind is open to change. If you're the type of person that is new to a game for the first time, new to the formula that they're trying to introduce, then the idea of reimaginings might feel better because of the modernized control schemes and everything else. You will be thrown into unknown territory, but it feels great if you're being introduced to something that might be easier to jump into as opposed to the past. Not many people talk about that reintroduction that reimaginings will do quite well as you go along with the story. The main elephant in the room might come with enemies being redesigned for the purest players or things being cut completely. I get it. When you cut something, that's a piece of content lost that could have been enhanced for a reimagined title. At the same time, some things probably didn't work or felt inconsequential when it came to adding those things from the original. For example, crows in Resident Evil 2 only served as a minor jump scare and that's it. They really weren't threatening, they really weren't intimidating, etc. The developers said that trying to shoot birds in a new third-person perspective probably would have been more tedious overall, and the birds would have been hard to hit as a result. Some design philosophies will warrant cuts just like this. Try to think about it for a second, okay? Imagine trying to shoot a black bird in third person while the environment is covered in darkness. Just think about that for a second. You see what I mean? It just doesn't work with the atmosphere, the scenario they try to create for the gameplay. So therefore, if you try to shoot these enemies with the gameplay present, with the black atmosphere and everything else, you can see that this will be game breaking and it will be not fun. At the same time, other cuts have no excuse. I can't tell you how A and B scenarios would have just enhanced Resident Evil 2 Remake overall. It would have enhanced the story, but Capcom decided in keeping them relatively the same. If you're going to reimagine an experience, then you can't put 2 steps forward and 2 steps back on this thing. You have to adapt it to the fullest extent. This is why people see Resident Evil 1 Remake as the true gold standard for remakes of that time, adding in new lore, new design principles, new enemies, and older content into the fold. If they cut something, it was very, very minor. That's not to say that reimaginings or remakes don't have a place in gaming. If you've enhanced that experience in some capacity, then you've accomplished your mission. The best perk to this turquoise pot is the crowd who wants to play a similar but largely unfamiliar experience, because this is the notch on that belt for a reimagined remake. It's conventional for newer gameplay updates on purpose. It's supposed to be all new ground when you finally boot that game. Twists, turns, and redesigns could shock you from start to finish. If you played these titles expecting nothing to change, then I think the idea behind reimagined virtues has flown over your head at this point. However, I do like when these new ideas force me to think on my feet when enemies don't function the same as they used to be. It brings an all new danger, an all new tactic to something you thought you figured out in just a newer way. There is a different ballpark that remains vacant for the ways that a remake can be approached. if I am distinctively talking about reimaginings, I think that I have a good idea how this all is tailored. The idea is difference, and these things can have different virtues if you create something refreshing as a result. The idea for a reimagining is to not replace. The idea is to invigorate what's already there under a new lens regardless. When you reconceptualize the idea, that is a perfect opportunity to fix things that really didn't age well, then you might have a winning formula. Case in point, Resident Evil 4 Remake and the island being a complete shooting gallery. I thought that part was boring. With the new stealth elements being presented in Resident Evil 4 Remake, it could offer a more intense, creepier, and completely just methodical atmosphere when you get to the island and you start sneaking around and you can't get spotted, where Leon has to avoid direct confrontation at all costs. That could be something riveting if done right, instead of just shooty bang bang, I'm bored until I fight Krauser. I think that this offers up opportunity to be great, and if it's great, I will like it. If it's not great, then those cuts will reflect once they are finally thrown into the open, because I know this game is going to cut some content here or there. Please, for the love of God, keep Mercenaries and Resident Evil 4 Remake, please. I just expect that to get cut, but please keep that regardless. Anyway, this is my sort of opinion and honest take on what I think of reimaginings and how they offer new things to the table, some of the flaws, nuances, positives that can be found in reimagining a game as opposed to doing it in another way. Hopefully you guys really enjoy this video. I'll leave some links in the description down below talking about how I thought of remakes before. I had some Last of Us videos where I talked about one-for-one remakes being fine, and I think, you know, I could also throw in some of the terms and terminologies, because now I think people got those terms mixed up between remake, reboot, reimagining, remaster, etc. So that was a good discussion video. It is a little long, it is like 28 minutes. Still, I hope you very much enjoy it as I knock around my pill bottle just like that. Anyway, I will see you guys next time. My name is Renegade Operative. You can find all my links in the description below, Discords, all that stuff, social media, Twitter, Instagram, etc. Hopefully you have a good time with that and be safe. I will see you guys next time. Be good people. Later.